Sid, thank you so much for being here. I know you just got back from a retreat with your team. Can you tell us a little about that just to kick us off?
For sure. It was an offsite, and that means that we all get together. We got together in my living room, so I didn't have to travel very far. And we spent 2.5 days talking to issues that needed a longer time to discuss than we do in our weekly meeting.
Cool. And is the picture behind you everyone at the retreat?
No, this is a quarterly thing we do with the exec team. The picture behind me is every 9 to 12 months, we bring the whole company together. This was the most recent time in New Orleans.
Got it. Cool. All right. So we'll get kicked off with a couple intros. First off, Gitlab. So Sid is the founder or CEO. I don't think you're actually the founder. There's somebody working on the open source project first, and then you became CEO.
We consider me and Dimitri co-founders.
Got it. Co-founder and CEO of Gitlab. That is an entire DevOps lifecycle platform. So what you might be used to with GitHub and a project management tool is all managed inside of one platform. Everything from task management to Git repos to CI and everything in between. Is that a decent description?
Yeah, for sure.
And then most of the people that you're seeing here today are recent graduates of Founder Lab. We just finished yesterday. So they were business experts in their specific fields, building everything from, we have someone building a marketplace of comedians as marketers. We have somebody doing a complete digital version of aligner therapy. We have someone working on transcribing any kind of visual content into audio so that people who don't really like reading it can just listen to it on the go. A lot of other things in between. We went through the basics of development, design, product management, budgeting, and over the last 6 weeks took people from being just business experts to also being product experts in their product businesses. Some of the other people that you might see here are either Turtle customers or internal Turtle team members as well. So I wanted to get started off with a few questions, and then we're going to open it up for the audience and questions too.
Cool.
Cool. So GitLab has raised over $100 million and is valued at over $1 billion. You're doing over $100 million in revenue per year, correct?
Not yet the 100 million in revenue. Hope
Okay.
to get there by the end of the year.
Okay. I was quoting the Forbes article. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And you, a lot of the journey started with YC. So I did want to ask, how do you think YC affected that trajectory, and where would you be today if that wasn't the path that you chose?
Yeah, so YC helped enormously with three things. First of all, it raised our ambition level. Before YC, we were planning to have a company of like 50 people in 5 years. And during YC, they say like, there's 113 companies here. 3 of you will become $1 billion company. If we knew which 3, there would be 3 companies here. So it's like Silicon Valley is like aim high or don't go to Silicon Valley and don't raise capital. The second thing it taught us how to iterate. So our peers in the group that we were at YC, they were much faster. They got a lot more done in 2 weeks, and we looked at, okay, what can we do? It wasn't that we were not working hard enough, but we could cut scope and get something out the door faster. So that became a company value. And the third thing is it makes it much easier to fundraise afterwards at a higher valuation you would otherwise get.
Makes total sense. All right, I was listening to your podcast with the 20-minute VC, which I think Harry did a phenomenal job interviewing you.
Yeah, it was great.
You mentioned High Output Management as your favorite book. Why and what has been your favorite takeaway from there so far, if there is one?
I like High Output Management because it's super practical. It focuses a lot on the speed of decision making. It focuses a lot on one-on-one conversations with your reports, and I didn't find that any information anywhere else.
Cool. I haven't read it, but I have ordered it because of the podcast. So you've got another.
Great. I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks. And then You're at over 700 employees now, all remote. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there another company that has a larger all remote base right now, or are you the largest all remote company in the world?
Both InVision and WordPress are about 1,000 people.
Okay, so you're one of the top three largest all remote companies in the world.
Yep.
So what's that been like? I mean, that's been a fundamental piece of building GitLab. You know, sounds like there have been no regrets there, but have there been any growing pains in growing a remote company? Or do you have any advice for founders here as they start planning companies and going remote or in-house?
Yeah, so we have lots of growing pains, but not due to all remote. It's one of the best things. One of our early investors recently gave me a call and said, look, I was skeptical for years about this, but now that I see it working so well, I think about investing in companies that are all remote. So where it went from something that reduced from what people thought of us to now adding to it. I think it's really important to, if you do all remote, do it early, do it completely, and change your work methods to accommodate it, and be intentional about informal communication.
Yeah. One of the things that you said in that same podcast that really resonated with me was, and I think resonates with anyone that might doubt remote working or not, is the infrastructure that you have to set up with documentation and work processes for remote are absolutely transferable to a traditional team as well. There's nothing about clean documentation and open communications and all that apply for remote that wouldn't benefit a non-remote company as well.
It's like going public. All remote and going public force you to do the things you should be doing anyway earlier.
And then I've got one more question, but if those in the audience that are going to start asking questions, if you could just start putting them inside the group chat so we can get them queued up, then we'll start going one by one and calling on you for those. So Sid, I've reviewed the handbook that you have a few times for a number of things. So you write a complete open book on how your company does business and how you make decisions and how you think about equity and all. Can you talk a bit about when you started that open handbook, how you think about it long term as your company scales, and I think you have plans to go public as well. Do you plan on changing anything there, or do you have any regrets on how you've done the open handbook, or has it been just entirely beneficial?
Yeah, we started it because we thought, or we opened it because we thought we wanted to keep the wider community around GitLab kind of feel close to the project. And because we were going to, as a company, we were going to be such a huge influence, we wanted to have visibility into that. And then the biggest benefit so far has been in recruiting, where people read the handbook, say, hey, this company makes more sense than the company I'm working at currently. And they opt into GitLab.
That's interesting. So recruiting, it helps as well. Have you had any founders or I guess any business persons reach out to you and just say that, hey, we found this thing in the handbook and we're totally applying it for our company as well?
Yeah, this is becoming more and more common, where people are like, yeah, we copied this, we copied that, or your handbook is the first stop anytime we have a problem.
Got it. All right. I want to start involving some of the audience here in questions. So looks like first up is Brianna. So Brianna, would you mind just giving a quick intro of yourself and then go ahead and start with your question?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brianna. I am helping out with Founder Lab, or have been helping out with Founder Lab. And I'm also a founder of a startup. We do product reviews with pictures for anything sold online. So my question was, how do you handle communication generally with remote workers? Obviously, that's probably the biggest downside I can think of with a mostly remote working staff. So do you mostly focus on asynchronous chat like Slack, or do you do a lot of calls and video chats to try and keep everybody in the same place at the same time?
Yeah, thanks for that. And maybe one of our shadows can paste our communication guidelines to help answer the question. But we try to be as asynchronous as possible. We got people in over more than 50 countries. So we try to work out of issues primarily. And if is not sufficient. We chat about things, and Slack is great about kind of discovery as well, like figuring out what warrants further discussion. And then when you find yourself going back and forth a few times, we tend to plan a call. But there's a lot more to that, and they pasted the link. Vlad pasted the link already. Nice, Vlad.
Kenny beat me to it, but yeah, it's right in there.
Awesome.
To piggyback a little bit on Brianna's question, I think some of the most difficult part, I mean, we're a totally remote company as well. So first off, thank you for convincing VCs and others in the market that this can work. The interpersonal parts and kind of the non-task-based communication are where it gets most difficult. Do you have any advice on whether you handle something like that in a video call, asynchronously, in person? Where does it cross the threshold of it needs to be face-to-face?
Yeah, I think the non-task-based stuff is really important to kind of build connection, build rapport, build trust. And we have different ways in which we encourage kind of informal communication. There's a good list on our all remote page or one of the sub pages of that. And I think someone will dig it up. Like every day we have multiple forms of informal communication that we encourage.
Got it. All right, next up, we got Nick. Nick, let me just unmute you there. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Sid, thanks for joining us. So my question, I'm curious, when you were first putting this company together, what's a process that you started really early on that you've continued to see sort of outsized impact on, now that you're a giant company?
I think the handbook is an obvious one. One thing I wonder why no other company is doing it is job families. So we have a clear distinction between a vacancy and a job family. They tend to have content that's almost the same, but the job family is just something that applies to everyone in the role, continuously get updated. And during the offsite, we spent some time even adding performance indicators to job families. So just making sure that everybody knows what to do. Having an online org chart so that everyone knows who someone's manager is, including the person themselves, and that there's only one manager. Things like that, I think, have an outsized impact.
Is that job families piece anywhere in the handbook as well?
Yeah, if you Google GitLab job families, you'll probably find something relevant.
There we go.
And Kenny has the link for the formal communication. I'd be very happy to elaborate on any of those.
Awesome. I think let's go on to HighKeys question now. HighKey, you want to jump in? Oops, trying to unmute you there. There you go.
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So my question was about what are the biggest unsolved challenges when it comes to building remote companies, and especially when it comes to creating interpersonal relationships, and how to motivate people just to get to know each other when they don't see each other, near the water cooler. So yeah.
Great. Well, let's go to that page. And there's a couple of things to do. We do company calls. So we have a daily call where everyone's free to add kind of subjects to it. We have breakout calls. So every day you're in a call with a fixed group of people and you talk about life outside of work. We have our contribute kind of unconference where we bring the whole company together, and then individual contributors put subjects to talk about in smaller groups without PowerPoint or anything like that. We do group conversations 4 times a week where there's a certain function presenting about a function of the company, but the presentation is already there, and the whole time we just spend on Q&A. We do coffee chats where you get paired one-on-one with someone. We do co-working calls. We do social hours. We have visiting grants, local meetups. We've got a CEO house, my house in the Netherlands, where you can stay free of charge. We have Slack channels based on hobbies and things like that. And we tend to like turn our video on in Zoom calls. So a whole lot of things to stimulate informal communication. And reading this list, Darren is doing a great job collecting all that information.
Andy's going to be up next with a question that actually isn't remote related, but while we're on remote, we spend a lot of time thinking about this as a remote company, and we're in this even smaller bucket of remote only for part-timers. And part of what constitutes making that successful is thinking about what doesn't fit remote and part-time. So things like you can't outsource and part-time your CTO. You really shouldn't do it for back-end type work, high security type work. Is there a type of work that you've seen that isn't a good fit for remote, or things that you may have thought were a good fit and ended up being a good fit, or vice versa?
Yeah, I really want to delineate remote versus part-time. At GitLab, we allow some people to work part-time, but we have like no part-time functions. We're almost tripling in headcount this year. And the biggest problem is like coordination costs, like in any significant size organization. And I think part-time makes that harder to deal with because the kind of fixed coordination costs are a much larger part of your effective number of hours. So
I hear Turtle
think
makes it a lot easier.
Sorry?
I hear Turtle makes that much easier.
Great. But yeah, so I think remote and part-time are just different concepts. You can be part-time when you're co-located or when you're remote. And I think it reeks a bit, combining the two reeks a bit of kind of outsourced work, which we don't have great experiences with. That skill.
Thank you. All right, we've got Andy up next. He's a customer of Turtles from Stitch Labs. Andy, you want to give a quick intro and then ask your question?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for joining us, Sid. I'm, as Vlad said, an engineering director at an inventory management company called Stitch Labs. Also run a coding school called First Step Coding. So yeah, my question is, I guess a more general one about GitLab. And you guys boldly entered a market with a really clear leader that wasn't a leader like that had been around for a long time, that was an obvious space for disruption. So just wondered if some more background on that, like what gave your team the early confidence, and what would you say to founders that are considering entering a market like that?
Yeah, Dimitri got the confidence from the fact he needed something like GitLab and he didn't have any budget to pay for it, so he made it himself. I got the confidence because I saw it was a year old and it already had 300 people contributing to it. So there was a need. And also I thought it was very logical is that the thing I collaborated with would be open source itself. Like, doesn't it make sense that the thing you use for open source is open source? So I saw that logic. And then early investors saw the amazing usage. We already had 100,000 organizations using GitLab at that time. And then later investors, they just look at the financials.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
If anybody has any others, please jump in. I'm going to go to my list otherwise. So I'll start with one. A lot of the Founder Lab participants would not self-identify as technical founders. They've surprised me as they've gone through and picked up concepts of development and budgeting and scoping very quickly. Do you think that it's critical to be a technical founder?
It's not critical, but it makes it a lot easier because hiring your first engineer is otherwise very, very hard.
Any advice for early, like a lot of founders find themselves as, I'm non-technical, I need to either find a technical co-founder or I need to find technical part-timers or some other way. Any ideas on closing that educational gap on getting technical enough to work with technical people?
Yeah, I think the default advice is like engineers don't like working for someone who isn't technical because they will not be able to evaluate their work appropriately. So try to get as technical as you can yourself. Try to learn how to code.
Got it. And it looks like Heike has another question. Heike, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so just a question about employees trying to get to know each other as friends. You mentioned that there's a lot of pre-scheduled informal chats where people get to know each other. What is the employee feedback to such sort of forced interaction, and how natural it is that people actually become friends with their coworkers just through online communication?
I love that. It's a great question. First of all, we're not requiring anybody to become friends with each other. So it's more like we're trying to stimulate the informal communication. I think the breakout calls, they're optional. So if you don't want to engage, that's fine. And that's in a group setting. And then the coffee chats, we require you to take 10 when you onboard in the company to get you used to that. You don't necessarily have to talk about your own life. It's just, there's no scheduled agenda. And I don't think it's super different from in a company like, hey, these are the people you should get to know. And if you talk about your private life, that's fine. If you talk about work, that's fine too. There's no enforcement of either. But it has been interesting that if everyone does it at a company, it doesn't feel weird, even though it might be a bit on the weird side. I sometimes compare it to kindergarten, where you kind of talk about your weekend on Monday in their class. And we do a bit of that. And it's not weird if everyone does it. So we didn't have any problems with it.
And it looks like we have one more question from Stephanie, specific on remote. Since it's in remote, I do want to ask, remote has become, I don't want to say a buzzword, but it's accelerated like crazy since even we met, or since either of us started our companies. It's like, it used to be something that didn't get taken seriously, and now it's something that it sounds like everybody's thinking about. And this topic of the kind of human side of remote work, the informal side of it, seems to be getting more and more popular. And I'd say that's probably one of the most important things that remains either unsolved or is solved very differently by different companies. Do you know any practices or companies in this space that are tackling the kind of informal communication part of it, the human side of connection, that are exciting to you?
Yeah, I think that we're on the forefront of like figuring that out. Not that we have all the answers, but I think that page we showed earlier, like 10 different ways in which we try to encourage that. I think that's more answers than I've seen elsewhere.
I love the the scheduled but informal coffee chats. We got to start doing that ourselves. So, Stephanie, do you want to give a quick intro and jump in with your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Great to meet you. So I'm the co-founder of a platform connecting brands and agencies with professional comedians. And so we're also really interested in building a platform that facilitates creative collaboration with the kind of comedic talents that we're planning to have in our database. So my first question is, we see the future, a lot of, other CEOs that I've talked to, they're also starting to sort of decentralize their workflow. A lot of their employees have started working remotely. And so I've always wondered, as we're shifting towards this kind of future, what does it look like in fostering and maintaining that culture where you want to make sure everyone is moving along in the same pace, have the same vision, shared vision when everyone's separated. And then my second question is, what does the incentive structure look like to make sure everyone is always motivated and held accountable in a structure like this?
Yeah, I'm going to take your last one first, and then feel free to ask a follow-up question. I think it's really important that you focus on results. So our number one value is results. what we mean with that is we measure your output, not your input. And I think if you're co-located, it's very logical to say, oh, that person's hardworking, they're at their desk all the time, they're very active in meetings, or I constantly see them running around. And because we don't observe what people do, it's easier for us to focus on results. And of course, that's much healthier. It leads to a better work-life harmony. It leads to the behavior you want to encourage. In the end, the company is about results, not input. And I think remote helps there, but it's a change in mindset. And there's very frequently new people come in and say, I'm going to track meeting attendance. We're like, no, you're not going to track meeting attendance. If it's needed for their job, people will figure that out, but you're going to track whether people accomplish their job. That's why we want managers who understand what people do. We don't do cross-functional teams and things like that, because we want your manager to be able to evaluate your output, because that's the only thing we're going to measure.
Thank you. And then can you talk a little bit about how you shaped the culture with everyone being, in different places?
Yeah, thanks for that. Our culture is defined as our values, nothing more. Like, we don't want people to say, oh, that's not a culture fit, and they just mean that person doesn't look like me or wouldn't be my friend or something like that. That doesn't, I want a diverse set of people. So our culture is strictly our values. And I think our values are stronger than in other companies, both because we define them better. If you type GitLab, if you Google GitLab values, you'll find that we give lots of examples, but also because we consciously reinforce them. We reinforce them in 11 different ways. When I ask other companies, frequently they cannot give more than 3 ways in which they reinforce their values. So I think we've taken a very conscious approach there.
Got it. Thank you. Well, Sid, I want to make sure to get you out of here on time. Can't thank you enough for joining us, and congrats to all the graduates of Founder Lab and going from business leaders to product business leaders now. Thank you so much for your time and for answering all those questions. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did as well.
Yeah, I thought they were great questions. So thanks everyone for asking them. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.